So today I'm going to be showing you how to work in the style of illustrator Lizzie Mary Cullen. Her main focus for her work is cityscapes, as you can see on the example here. But the main principles of her work are distortion. She distorts her buildings, her walls, she gives them curved lines instead of straight. She also does this to her flooring and adds lots of various other elements, such as stars we can see in the background, we can see swirls, we can see decorative leaves and flowers. Swirls seem to be the main focus of her backgrounds and some of the main features to her buildings. When working in the style of her, your main principles are using thick and thin lines, and your aim is to create a balance of block black colour and areas of white to balance it out, but I'm going to be showing you that as the video goes on. A good starting point to allow you to work in the style of Lizzie Mary Cullen is to pick your city. In this case we've got Birmingham, and I've gathered lots of pictures of key elements of the city. The library, the ball, some of the main buildings. It's also quite handy to have access in front of you of a research board. That'll give you lots of insight to pieces of her work that you can take elements from. And then you've just got a worksheet here that I like to refer to when working in the style of her. Again, picking out her key elements. Are you going to be adding distorted stairs, lights, buildings? What are you going to put in your background? Swirls, for example. Roads. How are you going to distort your buildings? Are you going to add extra lines to them? Where are you going to be adding your swirl detail? Just have a good look at all your resources and start to think about where your different buildings are going to be put, how you're going to distort them, and what extra features are you going to add. So the first thing I'm going to show you how to do is how I would go about distorting a road. We don't want straight lines, we want curvy. And to get some perspective, you can see it starts quite wide at the front and then goes narrow towards the back. And you can see on the Lizzie Mary Cullen example to the right of the screen, that's exactly what she does. Even the road markings, I start them quite wide and large and make them narrower and shorter as I go towards the back. Then you've got to think about how you're going to fill them in. Pattern, block colour, dots, lines. Here I've gone for lines. And again, to give that idea of perspective, that view of perspective, I've put my lines closer together the further away they are. All adds to the perspective. The lines either side of the road, you can see here as I'm making the video, I could do with switching to a wider pen. It's always good to have a range of pens at hand for a piece of work like this. So a broad marker, a fine marker, a thin marker, and a really thin marker, all good to have to hand. Because again, working in the style of that is just building up areas of block colour, thin lines, thick lines, using a range of different pens. And even where you don't want to add block colour, but you want to add the illusion of block colour in a different way, just adding lines thin together, close together, will give you the same or similar effect. And again, that's what the artist does. Her swirls then. Quite tricky, but once you get the hang of them, you can form them quite quickly. It's hard to explain this, but if you watch what I'm doing on the page, you can have a go. Got quite a thick fine liner I'm using here, middle of the range fine liner. I'm going to start with that. So I've got my basis of my swirl, just adding a couple of others. So this technique is just spiralling. I would call what I'm doing here a tester page, because I'm testing different techniques of how to work in the style of the artist. And there's 3 or 4 different ways there. I'm going to speed the video up a little bit now. So the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is if you wanted to add a street lamp or a street light, which if you look at Lizzie Mary Cullen's work, it does feature a lot in her backgrounds or foregrounds. So once you've drawn it, you'll notice that I add a background of light, but I'll show you how to do that. So you might have also noticed that I tend to start in pencil, and that's fine. Things I'm more confident with, I will go straight in with the pen. But most of the time, like you can see with this ball of light around the lamp, it takes a few goes to get that perfect. So it's great to start in pencil first. Then once you're happy, go in with the fine liner. Just keep an eye on which fine liners you're using and when. Make sure you keep switching them. It's all about that balance of thick, medium and thin line, and then block colour. You'll notice I didn't put a straight line to the lamp. Okay, so what I'm doing here, another thing that features greatly in Lizzie Mary Cullen's work is, I call it a pop art sun, but they're pop art style sunbeams. So using your ruler, and they work quite nicely from that lamp round shape. And then what that does is it creates you lots of different sections to add different bits and bobs into, using a technical term there. So I'm just exploring lines, dots, again thick and thin lines. You might want to block colour one of those beams in. You might want to leave it completely white, as long as you're really conscious of creating that balance. This is just a tester sheet, and all the time I'm having a go on this tester sheet, I'm thinking about my composition for my final piece. Where would this look good? Where would my road go? Where could I put buildings? And you'll find out what your strengths and weaknesses are as well. For example, I definitely wouldn't use the thick broad marker in my intricate swirls, because it doesn't work, as you can see by my right hand there. So the next thing I'm going to explore and have a play around with is distortion of buildings, and again I'm using Birmingham. So the first building that I'm going to start with is the Bullring, the Selfridges building with the circles on the rounded shape. Again, I'm going to start with pencil, and once I'm confident and happy with what I've done, I'll then switch to a pen. So it's a round building anyway, but I'm exaggerating things all the time. I'm exaggerating that curve, I'm exaggerating when where it finishes. Here we've got the Rotunda building, which is a round building again, where I'm exaggerating those curves, they're not straight. And I've gone for the fine marker here, not the finest, not the broad or the thick. And all the time you can see I'm having a go at, well, what could I put in that gap? I'm constantly thinking about how to bridge gaps, how to fill spaces. Is it going to be swirls? Is it going to be block colour? Is it going to be pattern? Now with a circle pattern on the side of the Selfridges building, as you can see here, they are all the same size in the flesh, but I want them to be different sizes. Dots, small circles, large circles, just playing around again with thick, thin lines and block colour. And as I'm filling in the rotunda building, you can see I'm really conscious not to overload any one area, because what you don't want is to add block colour to too many areas. You've constantly got to make sure there's enough white area and white space around it to balance it out, because otherwise it can just be overkill. Now Lizzie Mary Cullen's work is so busy and so intricately detailed that it's quite easy to overkill a piece of work. Try and restrain yourself and hold back in some areas. I often say to students, you've got so much intricate detail and objects and pattern in your work composition, leave the background plain. So after this building, the final building I'm going to show you is how I would go about distorting the new library. So again, it has got straight sides, but I don't keep them straight. I've curved them. They've got that gorgeous overlapping circle pattern on them in real life, and I've just exaggerated that. So guys, that's the end of my tutorial video on how to work in the style of Lizzie Mary Cullen. So your key points are thinking about your composition, making sure you keep enough white space, and you're using a range of thick and thin lines and block colour. Good luck.